How's it going, everybody? So today I thought we'd do something a little fun and do a little analyzing people's hot takes. Good old Dungeons and Dragons hot takes. Let's give them a little once over, and I thought we'd actually spend some time talking about it, right? See what it is that's behind these hot takes, if they have a point or not. So without further ado, let's get into some hot takes. First one, and I just kind of picking these randomly off the internet. There should be no rules.
Hey, Doc, we better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Now, I'm guessing what they mean by this. Here, give the devil his due here. What they mean is that it should be like a sandbox, right? You shouldn't be guiding people. Like there should always be a way to sort of break the rules, I guess. And to be honest, I think that's kind of like that's okay, right? You should always be, the DM has the final say. You can do whatever you want within the context, and everything should be possible, right? It should be kind of an open game. But does that mean that there should be no rules? Like you still want structure around the game. You don't want to have to, the DM shouldn't have to make every single call. It should be fine to roll some dice and let the dice decide, right? There should be some rules for, climbing this or doing that. Like you still want structure to, like, the whole point of having, rule books and playing, this game. Otherwise, we would just sit around a table and play imagination or something, right? So you still want some rules, right? And so to give the devil his due, I guess what I would say is that, like, I guess there's two facets to a tabletop role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, whatever. And they are that you essentially have the role-playing aspect where you're going around doing stuff, right? Which is the realm that needs less rules, right? That you want to be more open, more flexible on. But then a big part of that game is combat, right? And combat should have some structure, right? Now, it doesn't mean that these structures are ironclad and you can never break them, right? But you still want some structures, I think, right? And to kind of add on to this one, and that maybe it's a separate hot take, but I've also seen people say that players should know the rules, right? It's better when the DM just dictates everything in this regard so the players can't argue. And I said, maybe this is a whole new hot take about rules, but that's kind of just dumb. Like, again, I don't want to be the DM having to tell you every step of the way what you're doing, right? Now, if you mean players shouldn't read the DM's handbook or the monster manual so that they don't already know all the weaknesses of the monsters and all that. Well, okay, but then again, that's why you should kind of homebrew your monsters, right? Just pick them as, use the monster manual as a template and then tweak the monster so they don't know what's coming. That becomes no longer a problem, right? So rules you definitely want some rules, right? So that gives you some sort of framework, so we all understand more or less what's going on. You don't want to be boxed in completely by the rules, but you do want some rules, right? So it's kind of here's another one. Here's one I like. The PCs need to die. Death has to be a part of the game.
She won't answer the helm. We're locked into the moon's gravitational pull. What do we do? We die.
Again, this one I think is dumb. Games don't have to be anything, right? If you're going to have a very long campaign, right, players are going to be more invested with specific characters, right? And if their characters are dying and it's very hard to sort of come back from that, what ends up happening is that people aren't as invested in their characters, right? Because they're just going to die. Now, here's the thing, that can still be fun, right? If you make a campaign around death that's we'll say a high mortality rate, right? That can still be fun and still challenging. Now, you tend not to remember your characters as much, right? But it's still, tactically can be very fun. What you want when you're role playing is people to get into their character, right? if you're not invested in your character, then you're not really role playing, and then it just becomes kind of a tactical game, right? So the longer your character lives, right, the more you get invested in it. Now, there should certainly be some, death adds a certain kind of tension to the story, right? So you want death, depending on the game you're in, to be impactful, right? So if the PCs are doing something and somebody dies, do you want to just be like, don't worry, cast raise undead and they come right back? Well, then death doesn't have a lot of meaning. But if you're like, okay, you can bring them back, but their soul is trapped in whatever, and you need to go do this quest and, bring his remains and, get a finger bone from his dead father, something like that, to make it to where it's kind of interesting, it becomes a part of plot. You can still incorporate death that way. But a lot of long running campaigns, even ones that I've been a part of, go on for more than a year, and sometimes, break up over multiple years, and it's the same PCs, right? And people enjoy the game, right? It's their story. It's this long running dynamic kind of thing. You don't have to have them die. You can if you want to, but you don't have to, right? Like I said, conversely, I do remember a game we did, and this is back in AD&D days, and we were running an old D&D module, which I think was the Temple of Elemental Evil or something like that, where the DM had us roll 3 characters. And there was like 4 of us, and we each had 3 characters, right? And the idea was, as each one died, the next one would step in. And it was a very fun game. It was like only a 3 or 4 session game, and I don't really remember. I remember I had one of my characters was a rogue, and I died at the entrance of the temple because it was like the first thing, like, check this statue, save for death, and it was like, dead. But it was like this incredibly lethal game, but it was fun, right? And we all died. Conversely, some games go on where death is not necessarily, nobody wants to put a lot of effort into a character that dies, right? That they know is going to die, or if they suspect it's going to die. So again, on this one, you don't need to do anything, right? It just depends on the kind of game you want to run. And as long as you communicate that with your players up front, it should be fine, right? As long as everybody knows what they're getting into, it can still be fun, right? But you don't need, PCs don't have to die. It's kind of a goofy hot take there. All right, so number 3. A natural 20 should always succeed at what the PC is doing. Even if you don't want them to do the thing, you shouldn't have asked for a roll. This one I kind of agree with. I'm of the opinion that if you ask them for a roll, then it implies that there is some kind of chance of success. If there's no chance of success, then there's no point in making the roll. You're just being a dick, right? And some DMs do that. I think I've done that at some point. But it's always annoying as a player. It's like, especially if you're like, okay, well, let me calculate this. And they're like, yeah. And then they're like, ha, no, they're not, whatever, it bounces off, or, whatever it was you're doing. Oh, you can't pick that lock. And you're like, but I spent the time doing this. You should have just told me in the beginning. It's just annoying, right? If you don't want there's certainly better ways to handle that, right? If there's, to use the lock pick, if there's a lock that is just impossible to pick, the thief should be able, you should give them this, you can tell them, right? This lock seems beyond your abilities to pick, right? If they ask for a roll, can I still roll or something? Then maybe you can be like, sure, if you want. And they'll be like, it didn't work, right? But if you tell them to roll, you're telling them that there's a probability that they can succeed. And that's where it becomes you're being a dick, right? You're just being obnoxious. So on this spicy take, I guess it's not that spicy since I agree with it. Yeah, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't make people roll as a DM if there's no chance for success, right? It's pointless and annoying, right? You're just being annoying. Find some other way to tell them, right? Fair enough. So those are 3. I was only going to do 3. There's tons on the internet, but let's see what people think about these. Do want to get back to talking about D&D stuff instead of D&D drama, right? Just good old nerd stuff, because this is my nerd channel. All right, so those are my D&D hot takes, some DM and hot takes. If you have your own hot takes and you want to share them, I'm more than happy to take a look at them. Pop them down there in the comments. Be fun to see what you got.